Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for those of you that have come out at 5:30 this evening for a work session and a presentation. Little background. In July, Councilmember Melton requested the city consider having the police department report directly to the governing body or some other variation. So today, we were finally able to get some people together. Sheriff Frank Denning was supposed to be here, but he had emailed Mike Press earlier today and had sent his regrets he wasn't going to be able to make it. So since this had taken so long to begin with, we're just going to soldier on. And before we begin, I just want to say that this is, we've got now 1, 2, 3, 4 different people that are going to be here to present and just give us some of their experience and maybe talk to us about what's practical and what's best practices. And we're going to kick it off with local government consultant Mike Press. Mike's no stranger. He was interim city administrator here, as well as Edgerton, Eudora, and DeSoto. Before that, he was county manager for Johnson County, and prior to that, he was the director for MedAct, and before that, he was a first responding EMT. Paramedic.
I'll say EMT.
Pardon me? So, thank you for coming, and we look forward to hearing what we can gather from your esteemed panel, and I'll let you introduce them momentarily.
Well, thank you very much, Mayor and Council, and thanks for the opportunity to be here tonight. As the Mayor mentioned, we were asked to provide some expertise from our particular disciplines about the matter before you that you're considering. I'd like to introduce members of our esteemed panel, if you will, and you have your bios in front of you, so you can look at their background a little bit. Ken Sissom is Mayor Merriam, former police chief, and now runs the police academy at the Johnson County Community College. Ben Hart is auditor and vice president of your audit firm, AGH, Allen Gibbs and Hulick. And Terry Norwood is with Midwest Public Risk, and is your risk manager. So as you mentioned, you asked us to provide our thoughts and based on our experience and background, what effect a possible change in this reporting relationship might do. We'd rather have a dialogue than a formal presentation. I'm not bringing slides, and we're not going to lecture you. We want to hear from you, get your feedback, get your thoughts, questions, so we can address those. That's what we're here to do, and not just give you our point of view and perspective. I will start, though, with the management and what we call governance perspective. Local governments throughout this country have both formally and informally adopted a variety of ways to run their meetings and to behave and to get along. I think yours are called rules of procedure. And within your rules of procedure are many elements of this system of governance, if you will, called policy governance. Policy governance is a structure that was created by Dr. John Carver and his wife. You may have heard of it. It's very, very famous throughout the public sector and in non-for-profit organizations. I often talk about it. I teach it, and for me to do it justice would take way more time than we have tonight. So I'm going to just hit some very, very key points about policy governance. As I said, it has been proven to be the most effective, efficient, and accountable approach to governance. And the way it does this is by separating duties. So when it talks about the governing body, whether that's the board or the city council or the county commission, we're talking about the policy entity that determines the ends. We call them goals, we call them outcomes, but for purposes of this discussion, and because of the Carver model, he uses it because it really encompasses everything he's trying to explain, we call them ends. What are you here to accomplish? That's the council's role. Now that is differentiated from what we call means. We've all heard of ends and means discussion. The means are, how do we achieve those ends? And according to Carver, how we achieve those ends is the purview of the staff. The council decides, what do you want this city to look like? The staff is charged with making that happen. And your manager is evaluated on the success of achievement of those ends. It makes accountability very clear. Did we achieve those things? Yes or no? If we made progress, okay, there's a score there. If we achieved it, that's a pretty good score. If we didn't, we have an accountability, and then we have to deal with. So it makes the accountability and then the evaluation, if you will, of the manager very clear, because it's based on outcomes. It's based on, did we achieve what we said we were going to achieve? Now, is it completely black and white? Of course not, because there may be other reasons why certain achievements didn't happen. That's not anyone's fault on the staff or the governing body. So those have to be taken into account. So you measure your manager exclusively on those achievements that you have set out. This singular point of accountability ensures that there's not questions, there's not, well, wait a minute, but I said, well, manager said, I told the department head that it doesn't matter. All on the manager. That is your singular pivot point between the governing body and the public you represent and the staff that carries out all of those things that you want done. It's straightforward, it's understandable, it achieves the organizational results, and importantly, ensures accountability for the manager. I just want to quote one statement before I turn it over to Mayor Sissom. And this comes right out of policy governance book. It's in several manuals of cities that have adopted policy governance in its entirety. And it's a description of that linkage between the council and your staff. And I quote, the city council's official link to the operations of city government and staff is through and solely through the city administrator. All authority and accountability of staff as it pertains to the council is considered the sole authority and accountability of the city administrator. Again, none of this prevents discussion with department heads. None of this prevents you from doing what you think is in the best interest of this community, provided it does not violate these tenets of accountability. A very quick story. I worked for the county for 32 years and was county manager for the last 10. And we installed a forum of policy governance, mostly because of a couple of commissioners who enjoyed directly dealing with departments and then would ask them to do certain things that the rest of the board might not have been aware of. And so it always put the department head in a difficult position. We serve at your pleasure. We want to do what you want us to do. But we work for the entire governing body, not for an individual elected official. And so when you put staff in a difficult position, they're afraid, well, gee, he's a boss, better do what she or he says, but then I've got my own boss I've got to deal with. And it makes the accountability start to diffuse. This particular commissioner wanted something done on some roads. It wasn't in the budget. It was in his district. He asked the Public Works Director to take care of it. The Public Works Director didn't know what to do. He sat on it. He didn't tell me. I went to a board meeting the following Thursday and got chewed out royally. And after the tirade, I asked, why was I chewed out? And he says, because you didn't get that done. And I said, what done are you talking about? Well, those roads. I said, well, you didn't ask me about that. He says, well, I asked one of your department heads, and I said, the department head's not accountable for that until I hold him accountable. I'm accountable to you, and you didn't bring it to me. You cannot hold me accountable for that. And the rest of the governing body agreed. So what happened? We have this disruption in the meeting. We have something that might have been accomplished for that commissioner had it been handled through the proper policy governance approach, and everybody would have been happy. So I'm going to turn it over to Chief System for his comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike.
Good evening, everyone. It's kind of awkward being on this side of the
It's different, isn't it?
microphone, yeah. It's my pleasure to be here tonight. I've got some points to share with you, and I think some important things have already been said in terms of why I'm here or what I would like to see you to do with any information I might give you. And I'm completely impartial. I'm here really to talk about some of my experiences as not only a police chief but as mayor, and kind of the relationship that I've had with city administrators and with mayors in the past, and some of the pitfalls of maybe talk about some of the pitfalls that could occur should you be successful at making this change, because I think having the information on the downside of things is important in order to make a good decision, because sometimes decisions that are bad can be very expensive. I served 31 years in law enforcement before I retired, and one of the reasons why I ran for mayor actually had to do with an incident where I had some council people that were trying to get me fired as chief. So I ended up retiring at the age that I could, at 50. Luckily for me, I was teaching college, so I went into that field. But I made a decision to run for mayor to make a difference, to make sure that my staff are not treated the way I was when I was police chief. I had an excellent career. In fact, the reason why they wanted to fire me was because I liked the former mayor too much, they thought. You see, I was very supportive of the mayor that half of the council didn't like, and she decided not to run again. And as soon as she didn't run and someone else did run that they put into place, they systematically started changing things. They fired the city attorney, the judge, city administrator left, and I was next on the list. And luckily, the new mayor, stood up for me because I was the only employee that was going to be affected by it. Therefore, I got to keep my job and finish out my career. Being the mayor has been a really great experience. It helps coming into that position with having the experience that I had. In fact, I had attended every council meeting. I became mayor in 2009, and I attended every council meeting except for about 6 since 1991. So I knew an awful lot about the council. And I can't say that the way our city is, the way ran is the same way that you run your city. It's a different city. We have more council people, for example. But there is something to be said for a definite direct line of supervision, particularly when it comes to department heads. All of the department heads in the city of Merriam are answerable to our city administrator. We have a very, very distinct difference and understanding between policy and operations. And the council's job is to create policy, and the staff's job is to take care of operations, much like you just heard. Having a city administrator in place gives department heads a central individual that they're accountable to. That's very important, because police chiefs are no different than public works directors or planning directors. They typically want to know who they work for, they want to know what their job is, and they want to know how they're doing, and having a central individual in place is very important. Now, who that central person is also important. Obviously, they have to have open lines of communications, they have to have knowledge and professional training. In fact, that's very, very important to you all for considering doing this because, and I don't know anything about the background of any of you folks. If you're like my council, I have a pretty varied group. Got 2 school teachers. The councilman that just resigned due to health was a construction worker. I got a lady that retired from Hallmark Cards. Another one was in corporate case management. Had a former fire chief. These people are all good people like you are, I'm sure, and interested in doing what you can for your community. But none of them have a background in personnel management, HR, and all of the things that you need in order to be a professional city administrator. And we hire professional city administrators. We usually pay them pretty good because of the training and expertise that they bring to the job. With police departments, it's particularly important because that's the department that will cost you the most money if things are not done right.
Mm-hmm.
The civil liability that police officers deal with on a daily basis is a little bit, well, it's hard for people to understand if you're not trained in how to deal with it properly. As a council member or as a mayor, you may make the wrong decision and give the wrong advice if you happen to be the person in charge of the police chief. For example, use of force. I think your city's going through some litigation right now. We won't talk about that with regard to use of force. Police pursuits. Confidential criminal investigations. When I was police chief in Merriam, I was involved with our department and with county, state, and federal officials on criminal investigations going on in residences in our city. These are investigations that were highly confidential. I felt as it was my duty to inform our city administrator when the investigation got to a certain level where arrests were going to be made. And I could trust the city administrator to make sure that was going to remain confidential. And there's a lot of things I could trust that the city administrator was going to do because the city administrator was an employee just like me who was accountable to someone else, and that was the council. Search warrants. We had search warrants, high-risk, armed felony search warrants that were going to go down that could impact an entire neighborhood. These were search warrants in residences that had neighbors who were council people. So again, confidentiality is very, very important. I'm not sure that's a responsibility that any of you might want to have. Human resource issues. Policing is a different animal than any of the other employees you have. They're a 24-hour, 365-day operation. With policing, we require our police officers to be at a higher standard than other city employees. It's the only profession in the United States of America where they have the right to take a person's life. So therefore, our standards that we put in place for those employees are higher. You have to have that understanding. Our hiring standards are higher. Their performance and behavior standards are higher. The training that's required to keep your certification in the state is complicated. It's like right now it's 40 hours a year. I don't know that any other profession in the city has that requirement. Personnel law. Whoever you would put in charge of the police department should have a good background and understanding in ADA, FMLA, FLSA, because if you do something wrong again, the city gets into trouble. So it's one of those jobs that if you do decide to take it on, make sure you understand that you have those obligations as well. Chief Denning was going to be, Sheriff Denning was going to be here. He was chief before he was sheriff. He was going to be here this evening, and I was kind of hoping to follow him because he would have been able to say a lot of this stuff a lot more eloquently than I am saying it. And he would talk to you about the differences between a sheriff and a mayor. Being a mayor, being a sheriff and a chief, because being the sheriff as opposed to being the chief is that you're an elected official, and the sheriff is not accountable to the county commission per se. He is his own boss. He doesn't have to answer to the county manager. He doesn't have to answer to the county commission. When the sheriff does something wrong, he gets sued, he gets bad press, If he does something illegal, he can lose his job, and in 4 years or 3 years or whatever he's got left, he could get voted out by the people. So he has the luxury of not having a boss and making decisions and being totally responsible for it. As a chief, as a police chief, you don't have those luxuries. You're an employee. And in the state of Kansas, you can be terminated as a police chief anytime you guys decide that's what you want to do, and there's really pretty much nothing that they can do. City councils change. While I was working for the city of Merriam, I worked for 8 different city administrators. I worked for 2 different mayors, and I worked for many, many, many different council people. Most of them I would have no problems with, but there's a handful of them that I would not want to be accountable to, because their hearts were not in the right place as far as what I saw. It's important that there be equality among all the department heads. You shouldn't place one department above the other, and if you bring that person out of the control of the city administrator and put it directly under the council, that's exactly what you're doing. That creates dissension throughout the department heads as well. There needs to be due process, too. That's another consideration. A police chief is answerable to a city administrator under normal circumstances, and if that city administrator takes enforcement action against the chief, then they have the right to due process through the council. If you take the city administrator out of that chain, who do they have due process through then? The council decides to do something punitively, it's the chief, there is no one left in the chain, so that creates another unfair situation for the police chief potentially. Plus, I don't know how they would work. I don't know how it would be to work for 5 or 6 different bosses. I don't know if one of you be assigned to be their supervisor, whether that would fall to the mayor, I don't know. But it would be a unique arrangement, and I would say that it could work. I would say the opportunity for bad things to happen, though, are increased, and that could spell problems for your council, for your citizenry. And from a legal perspective. I haven't always gotten along with my city administrators. I haven't agreed with everything they did. But I always found that, they have a hard job too. They're the ones that have to please you. And they also have to make sure that there's enough money at the end of the year. So the police chiefs and the city administrators need to work together and recognize that everybody's on the same team and we're all moving in the same direction. I'd be open for any questions that you might have.
Well, we can ask Mayor Sisson if anybody's got questions right now. We do have a couple of people that are going to give us a little bit more information, and then maybe we can have a nice rollicking discussion.
Okay.
Mayor, if you'll hang tight with us.
Yep. Thanks, Mayor.
And thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Ben Hart. As you know, I'm your auditor, but tonight I'm going to talk a little bit at a higher level. Standards require me to maintain my independence from management decisions, but that does not preclude me from being here and imparting what I've seen, what we experience, and our standards that we use on an audit. As you guys know, I've always every year talk about our responsibility of actually issuing an opinion that your financial statements are free from material misstatement. Sounds like a really easy job that's only going to take a couple days and we're out. It's not quite that easy. As part of that, a very large part of that process is an evaluation of internal controls. Ahead of that is an evaluation of the governance structure of an entity, whether it's a county, which I've got 2 fairly large county clients as well, so I know what Mike and the mayor was talking about, as well as cities. The governance structure matters. So who reports to whom, what their experience is. If a sheriff's got the experience to manage a sheriff's department, then obviously it's a fairly clean line of understanding what they need to do. There are cities on the Missouri side where there is no city manager, there's no city administrator. They're very small cities. that it works, because each department knows what they need to do, and maybe there's 20 people that actually work for the city. Most of them are out on the street repairing roads, and that works for them as well. But that governance structure for us is very important. Any changes between a policy and what you've heard so far talk about policy and operations, the question is going to come up to that entity as to why, what the goal is, what's the ends, what are you trying to get to, what's the benefit you're trying to obtain. There's got to be an understanding as to why that change was made so we can go ahead and plan our audit. Now, you think of a line department or an outwardly serving department like a police chief or a police department, you're not really thinking a whole lot of financial transactions here. But think about it, they have a lot of technology, assets, incredible amount of assets that turn over rapidly, and for that matter could turn over even more rapidly depending on what the situation, environmental control issues, or if there was wrecks, speed chases. It just all depends on what it is. And there's also cash receipts, potentially, grants. There's very large grants in some police departments. Kansas City, Kansas, and Kansas City, Missouri have forfeiture grants where they receive all the money on drug busts or drug buys. One of my earlier jobs was to audit a police department as an agreed-upon procedures of a client. Had walked in there and the safe was open, cash falling out of it. Who was going to go up and talk to that police chief about that cash falling out of the safe? It was the county administrator that ended up going up to talk to him and said, "Don't do that again, or you're going to have to find another job." Close the safe. We're the ones that found it. But it was a direct line of accountability from that city or that county administrator, that city manager, to that police chief to make that happen. Some grants that police departments actually apply for require a level of independence between the governing body and operations or management structure, which in this case would be a city administrator or county manager. And those are grants that are pertain only to a police or law enforcement agency. A couple other ones would be setting pay rates, and the last one would be legal fees and any kind of settlements. What's the likelihood of a settlement within a police department or something that they've done actually getting settled out of court, or what's the council's responsibility or the governing body's responsibility to that action taken upon that by that law enforcement division. Impact on insurance is obviously a big one, but I'm going to let the NPR talk about that one. Some of the additional questions we would be asking is what the relationship between the operations of the police department is and the rest of the city. Are they held to the same standards? Are they required to take the same process through purchasing processes or HR processes? Pay rate setting, is that all the same processes? And then who's going to sign off on that elected official or that appointed official that reports to an elected official? Who's signing off on, let's say, their purchasing cards? As simple as that. Or bigger yet, an RFP. Who's going to make the final decision on whether that actually goes to the council or the governing body? And they can be very large RFPs that come through for any of the departments. Hiring decisions, final authority on hiring decisions, depending on what the line of accountability or the line of operations authority, who would that need to be? Is that the governing body right now in the state of Kansas? Of course, I'm not a lawyer, but from what I understand in the state of Kansas, it's up to the city administrator to be that final decision authority once the budget is set, which you guys already do. You set a budget based on pay rates and FTEs. So that would be a question that auditors would typically ask. With that, I'm going to let the rest for questions at the end.
Great. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you, Ben.
Good evening. Again, I'm Terry Norwood, the Executive Director of Midwest Public Risk. I've appeared before you a few times over the years, and I'm grateful to be back and in an important discussion. I have a couple facts and figures I'll throw at you. I'll have a couple theories. Please understand that if I use a word which may seem to you volatile, I don't know what your opinions are. I've not been prepped No one has talked to me about this other than I've gotten a couple of emails over the past couple of months. This subject may come up. But it's important to me, and I'm grateful for the invitation. In my world of about $10 million worth of dollars flowing through a liability program, I'm in my 11th year. Let's just round it down to 10, call it $100 million. About two-thirds of my activity, two-thirds of my job is associated with cleaning up behind or correcting law enforcement scenarios. Of all the city operations, of all the county operations, this is where I spend my focus. And it is not at all unusual for me to be in a chamber somewhere talking about these kinds of things. And usually, they're the downstream issues. But this is one of the times I have an opportunity to talk to you about an upstream issue. And that's where we can have a positive change, or at least make an impact. So I wanted to set that in motion, and one other thing. Lord knows none of us needs to talk about politics, right? I've been absent from television for about the last 3 or 4 weeks, and I actually feel like a better human being now. It is more divisive now in our lifetimes than it ever has been before. That's not because of you. It's not because of me. It just seems to be a groundswell that's going on in all the council chambers and state houses and the federal bureaucracy. And who knows where this will all end up. But suffice it to say, there are strong opinions out there, and we are at each other. This topic actually sent me back to do a little bit of study because I wanted to do a good job for you tonight. And Barry said one of the most important things I do. Really, I'm about as close to an expert as you're going to get on this subject. However, an expert would also bring you, there is no one single opinion in this U.S. of A. that we operate that says one side or the other. Wherever your vantage point is, wherever your starting point or ending point is, you can go out there and find articles or resources or someone that's going to agree with you. Because this investigation you're going through, this discussion that you're having, has been had in other places, and they've worked it over pretty hard, and they've arrived at wherever they've arrived at. So I'll keep my comments in 4 areas, trying to be organized. A couple of comments you've already heard, but those 4 areas are control, recruitment, which hasn't been touched on, the national environment, and risk, which is kind of left to myself. In control, you know what? Whatever you do, I'm going to more than encourage you. I'm going to lean in with some passion. Do it with complete consensus. Work out. You set the tone. You set the culture. And if you set the culture wrong, I'm going to be a very busy person. And this is one you do not want to fail at. This is one that you want to leave a lot of your own personal opinions. This is one you want to educate yourself as much as you can, because it is just too important. Do you have unison on your other issues? Well, of course not. The American government doesn't run that way. Basically we're able to have some quality governance because we have people on the left side or the right side, and collectively, with all those varying opinions, kind of keeps us rocking down the center. So whatever your discussion, I'm going to more than encourage you, is make sure that you take those hits and that you rock down the center, and that you look at one another and say, we have consensus on this issue. I report to 2 pools, 2 major organizations. One of them has 7 directors, the other has 11. This is my version of, I pretty much start over every other year. Because there are those people that say, well, what are our goals? Well, I don't remember talking about that. Well, you weren't part of that council. So we go back over that. And I get 35 goals for this year, and then a year or 2 later, people say, what do you got 35 for? You need 5. You need to just focus on what's important. And I just kind of bounce back and forth, and I'm perpetually starting over, perpetually. In fact, 8 o'clock tomorrow, I'll be with one of my new directors, giving them a new director orientation, trying to bring them up on the issues. I can hardly wait. Because they're there because they want to make a difference. They're there because they want to do those things. I haven't heard mentioned yet, though, whatever you decide, remember, you're deciding for those that come behind you. You know, they can change things too. But most likely, what you set in motion is going to be there for some time. And whatever your opinion is, they're going, from just experience and probably your own, that's going to change, and they're going to interpret that differently. So you want to be as concrete as possible. The manager, factually, a city manager form of government, an executive form of government, has always acted as that buffer between the council and the changes and the variety of opinion into the consistency of one reporting relationship. Now, I wouldn't argue that point, no matter what your opinion is. It's easier. It may not be a good one, but at least it's one that you can change. It's only one thing, is what I'm trying to say, that needs to be changed. When you involve more multiple opinions, you get what I described as you just kind of bounce back and forth in a much, much wider arena. Recruitment. You want to attract the best individual that you can. Not that it's getting harder, it's just that they have to come with more skills. A lot more skills than they used to in 2017. Did you know that the average police chief's tenure in the U.S. is less than 3 years? That's the average. So that's in an organization that's going well. That's the average. So every other one is less than that. And that includes those that have been promoted from within. When you start going and recruiting from the outside, that drops dramatically to less than 2 years. So what you have will be those individuals in the future coming in and looking at Gardner and saying, do I want to be involved in this kind of situation? We see the world from our own background and experience, and that's the best I can do for you. I kind of laugh because I grew up here, but I was gone for 25 years, and I took a job back in the Kansas City area. To be honest, I didn't have that much competition, because those people that want to make a change nationally, they'd rather go to Florida. They want to take a job in Arizona. They want to go out in some resort area in California or Washington or someplace. They don't want to come over to this flyover territory that you and I call home. I made a good decision, but you're going to, by where you are, you're going to narrow your possibilities to begin with, and you could narrow them by the environment that you set in that reporting relationship. And I think this is very important. When they did a survey of chiefs across the country and asked them what they disliked most about their jobs, well, you know what the answer was. It's the politics. We all complain about our bosses, don't we? But they said politics. All of this goes to recruitment. Give that some considerable weight in your dialogue and in your decision-making process. The national environment. A lot of this was brought forward in our area by Ferguson. I have been dealing with Ferguson considerably in my career since it occurred. There's some Baltimore and there's some other scenarios in there, but for you in this area, we've got that. Be aware that this is not an abstract thought. This is not a throw-in on my part. I've met with and talked with the assistant city manager at Ferguson, no longer employed there, finally said enough. 80 to 90% of the people arrested in that scenario after it occurred were from out of state. This is the era where there's just, again, the internet flash mobs bring people in. The attention and the scrutiny that's coming from anything is not just intercity anymore. It's not regional. It's everywhere. And you need someone with those skills, but you also need someone to have a plan and someone that's prepped and willing to do those kinds of things. Federal government came in, and within a day, they had basically found the city guilty without asking. No one ever talked to them. No one ever contacted them. No one asked. They had never Never. You're not supposed to use exclusive words, but I'm going to go ahead. They didn't have any complaints in the prior 10 years for anything on civil rights or planning and zoning and that. It's just, but all of a sudden, everything is raw. They placed a program that says they have to hire. My figures are a little soft on this because I'm going from memory. Something like the table of organization, they had to have like 55 officers. Well, they only have 35. And the budget doesn't respond to that kind of number. So they don't know what they're supposed to do at this juncture. Again, it's just not abstract. You're going to have these types of issues are before us now. And then there's the fairness they put in. Fairness in procedures among the ranks, fairness in distributive promotions, and that's always been there, but now those are coming under scrutiny. And if the council is involved in more and more detail or descends more and more, you have more and more cooks in the kitchen. The risk, my area. Well, before I do that, you can say, well, why did you talk about those other three? I just got back from Southern Cal, meeting with a career police chief, now a city manager, and he involved himself as the advisory chair of a pool of large California municipalities. He said it all comes down to morale. It doesn't matter among the rank and file, the morale of the illnesses, injuries, liability incidents. You want to have that good spirit score and morale among the officers, and a lot of that's going to filter from above. So you want a very solid coming from the chief, and the chief needs to be in a good spot. So your chief, however you decide, needs to be in a position to move freely to do those kinds of things. I mentioned we had more lawsuits in employment on this position than anywhere else. I've got about 6 open right now where the police chief has been terminated, and it's just, my point there is just really easy to get crosswise and to get in areas that are negative. So it comes from consistency with this council, consistency for future councils. This is not just a business. This is the public trust. This is the safety. This is the crime. This is the civility or incivility that you deal with or don't. And it needs to be consistent. Mm-hmm. Then there's the issue of personal liability. Presently, you don't have that because you don't have that direct reporting relationship, so you're not going to be named. You could be, but it's going to be really easy to get you out. By interjecting yourself into the picture, you just create liability where none exists. You should be aware of that, and that's important. I would want to know that if roles are reversed. So I wish you well in this discussion, in this important area. Others have done it. Anything that we can do from our services and research, we're more than happy to do. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Terry.
Thank you, Terry. All right, well, I'm going to open the floor for questions or comments from the council members. Feel free to call on any of the people that we have here this evening, or feel free to make suggestions beyond what has been suggested already, and let's put it through. We do have some experts in-house. Let's put it through the meat grinder. And see where it goes. Does anybody want to start? Steve?
Yeah, I'll start. I've got several questions that came to mind when we were going through. And thank you very much for your presentations, gentlemen. Appreciate your time and coming out and giving us some good information. Really appreciate it. I did some research on the Carver model, actually, before I came into this. So I get the ends versus the means, but there's also something called advise and consent role. And there's something else as well called monitoring. And how do you bridge, and I'll address this question to Mr. Press first, because obviously you've got quite a bit of experience with the Carver model, but how do you reconcile your advise and consent monitoring role with the role of the chain of command or the reporting structure I know there are other, I'll get to the next question, but just get your thoughts.
Advising consent to the manager, you mean, or to the rest of the?
Correct, to the city administrator.
Right.
For the duties of that particular role, or as we see it, our own policy
Sure.
decisions on that.
Sure, well, you establish what you intend to achieve, and through that conversation with your sole employee that you should be dealing with, that's
Sure.
where you have that conversation and discussion about how that's supposed to go. Now, the advice and consent, obviously, that role is to carry out the wishes of the governing body.
Mhm.
So once that's been determined, to assist in that role, to help the city manager, to provide advice, I don't see any conflict
Okay.
in doing that while establishing the fact that you're not going to be directly involved in a conversation with a subordinate in order to make something happen.
Understood. What about monitoring and oversight then? How do you manage oversight? I know that you place a lot of trust, and
Yes.
the word comes,
Yes,
the word trust comes to mind,
sure,
and really that's what it comes down to.
absolutely.
But if you wish to have some sort of oversight,
Yes.
are there other vehicles?
You have actually, and I don't know how far you got through the model, but the oversight is one of the critical factors that makes this model work.
Okay.
Okay, so there's a whole set of criteria that talk about monitoring that performance against the policies that you've established.
But the sole point of accountability then falls at the feet of the manager administrator.
That is correct.
Okay. And then the last thing was, there are other entities, and maybe this is something I could also ask this of Terry. There are other entities, some of the largest cities in the country, as a matter of fact, utilize the police commission model, which is an appointed board
Correct.
of third-party individuals that would have some oversight over
Correct.
the activities of the police department. Again, because of the Ferguson issue, that we're all very much aware of, there's more scrutiny and greater focus of liability on the police department than it's ever been.
Sure.
And I'm trying to take the who out of the process and go to the what. And the what is, how do we manage the trust element of the citizens as well? Because, there's a trust gap there in a lot of municipalities when it comes to police and how it fits into governance. So because it's different from any other department.
No, it really is. But as far as the manager is concerned now, and as far as everything that goes on in the organization, the last part of the governance model says, here's how you hold accountable. And it's through monitoring reports.
Okay.
So if it's a police area or a public works area and you've got goals in those areas, you get a report based on the frequency that you determine, whether it's monthly or every 6 months or annually, depending on, how fluid and volatile a particular topical area is. You set that up ahead of time.
Absolutely.
It's a clear expectation. I think in Edgerton, where it was fully installed, they have 8 or 10 monitoring reports that are of varying frequencies. And that's how you get the information about what's going on. And if there's something that's missing that you need to make a policy determination, all you have to do is ask. That's your information.
And if we don't get that information, then we hold, again.
You hold the manager accountable. Very straightforward.
Okay, thank you.
You
Appreciate
bet.
your time, Mike. And I didn't know if Terry wanted to weigh in on the risks element with regard to police commissions.
What little I know, those are usually the larger
Yes, metropolitan
cities
areas,
and
yes,
metropolitan areas.
correct.
In response to your question of how would a council person manage appropriately, they have, I've seen 7-point programs, 9-point, they all start with a Citizens Advisory Commission.
Which we have.
And they follow right down the line, and then the police chief would be responsible for coming in and giving those report outs on those.
Okay, great, thanks, Terry, appreciate it. That's all I had.
Yeah. Now, I do want to point out, I know that the Kansas City, Missouri's got a
Correct.
police commission. Honestly, if you can name the other cities that are actually run by and not advised by police commissions,
Well,
I'd be interested to hear.
City of
because
Los Angeles, City of Chicago.
Well, and I think what we're talking about here is form of government. Your form of government is not the commission form of government.
That is correct.
And it really came from the old days, the before Pendergast and then through Pendergast, and that's why they changed the commission form of government. Chicago in particular was one of the more corrupt commission forms of government, may still be, but they had a road commissioner, and they had the police commissioner, and they had the public works commissioner, and people were spending a good deal of their time running personal errands.
Sure.
And not too far away from here, I can tell you that during a snowstorm, when I'm visiting I was, way back when, now my wife of 32 years, my girlfriend in Kansas City, Kansas, their street was always plowed before anybody else's. And I asked why. It was just a little suburban street. Well, the street commissioner lives on that street. It got plowed first.
So that whole patronage thing.
It really, the commission form of government really encourages patronage and has been petered out, except in some of the very largest, oldest cities where the commission form of government still holds.
Okay, great, thanks.
And then my point was, I know that the people that are on the police commission in Kansas City, Missouri, we've got 6 people, attorneys mostly, Alvin
Alvin Brooks.
former law
Michael
enforcement.
Rader, yeah.
Yeah, and then Mayor Sly James, who's not only mayor, but also an attorney.
But it's really a state function.
Mandated by the state.
Yes.
So I think it's like the only one in the country like that, isn't it?
Oh, close.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, which actually takes me to a different question. It's, I mean, I know that they have their own budget that has to get approved, I want to say, and actually Chief probably knows this better than any of us because he worked in the department for 30 years. But I want to say the budget gets approved by the police commission and then gets approved by the legislature and the governor, and then the city has to pick up the tab, or by all means.
It's approved by the city, solely by the city. The police department submits a budget request just like any other department in the city. Once it's approved, then the board and the staff can change the line elements of the budget throughout the year, but it is just approved by the city. Legislature and governor has nothing to do with it.
Okay.
Yeah, the revised statutes of Missouri require that kind of approval, but I think they made a change to the statutes for their own community. I've got all the information here on my computer, but yeah.
Okay. Lee, you look like you want to say something.
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering how the formation of, say, a police commission would differ from what we had in form of an electric utility board several years ago that ran our electric utility with a volunteer board. The director of the utility would bring items to that board. It was pretty much run independent of the city administrator. And how would that model not work in this scenario?
I'm trying to recall, did they have hire and fire authority over the utility manager?
No.
And did they have budgetary authority over the utilities? Or
Actually,
did that budget have to come to the council?
The budget came to the council.
Okay, so I would tell you that was an advisory committee,
Well, and
much
actually,
like many advisory committees exist throughout government to help come to conclusions.
actually, the electric utility board did have higher fire
Did it?
authority over the electric director.
Okay. But the budget still came to the council, as I recall.
Ultimately.
Laura, can you,
Yep.
yeah, that's but it was approved by the electric utility board, just adopted by the council?
I believe that's the case.
Well, technically, but as city attorney reviewed that ordinance, it's discovered that actually the advisory board had no authority to approve the budget. And so, if you recall, we did have one year where something went awry, where council wanted one thing and the utility board had another, and Director Krawcheck and I were in the middle. And that's how, in the end, the governing body is responsible per statute to approve the budget. So they can advise, but they're really not approving anything until it gets to the governing body. They can make suggestions, they can say, oh, we approve, but technically speaking, you approve.
Correct. That was mine.
Can I ask, was performance of the utility director, was that responsibility of the
Electric utility
UB?
board.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah.
So the other thing I was kind of wondering is, maybe we could start over with the problem statement. Rich brought this up back in July. So what is what problem are we trying to solve with this?
Well, for me personally, I think when I was when I went to the Citizens Police Academy, I saw what I felt was over a period of decades, the police department was neglected. Be either from previous councils, mayors, chiefs, I'm not gonna pin it on any one person, but I think from my perspective, because that department, and I've said it before, just like Mayor Sissa said, runs 24/7, 365, it needs some special attention to make sure that things continue to run smoothly. We have at least three, if not four police cars on the road all the time, so in my estimation, we should be budgeting every year for at least 3 new police cars, because we know they're gonna have 60,000 miles on them minimum by the end of that year. That's just one thing, and then it's like vests or anything else, or scheduling for, trying to figure out how we're gonna get to a point with the new law enforcement center and all these things that really need to be, in my estimation, handled differently than they've been done in the past. So, and that's part of I think the reporting structure helps with a lot of that, because right now we get funneled information as far as I'm concerned.
Well, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, as county manager, I mean, you can't give a fire hose, stream of information to county commission members or the county commission chair, because they're not there all the time. They're not there every day. They're not.
Well, and like it's already been articulated, it changes, and things do change, and it's hard to have that when the accountability is clearly known. And I might just add on to what you have commented on. Are getting new police cars every 60,000, is that a means or an end? Okay, so let me propose that having a fleet that is well operational and completely meeting the needs as articulated by the police command staff is your end. Okay?
I understand that.
And then whether it's 60 or 75,000, or when the cars ought to be bought, is up to the manager and the police chief, based on their consultation and determination and budget considerations and concern for other departments where the cost may be more than the vehicle. The cost may be we can't do that in another department if we do that in this department. But your end, in my view, and again, you're the council, you do whatever you decide to do, but the end is make sure the fleet is operational and doesn't fail and is always ready to roll based on the police chief's demands and desires. You work that out with the city manager. They figure out how to do fleet management. Your end, your goal is achieved, and the operational people have made that happen for you. I think that's the best way to assure that those things are.
We haven't had that in the past, and that's part of the problem. So, I mean, we had cars running around here with 150,000 miles on them.
But like you said, who
when they were running, right?
But who is accountable for that? I had ambulances that I had to trade in at 60, and I had some that went to 180. And it wasn't about the mileage; it was about the type of vehicle and the kind of care it got, and just whether it was a lemon or not. And so there wasn't any hard and fast mileage rule. It was just a matter of determination. And I looked to the people that drove them. I had
that
them.
never happened, I can guarantee you. Because I was in that police academy when there was a 1994 Ford Explorer that we spent $4,000 rebuilding the front end on. The car wasn't worth $4,000 because we had to have a vehicle. That was the only four-wheel drive we had besides 93.
So the question is, if you're not pleased with managerial things, do you want to involve yourself in managerial things, or do you want to change?
To be perfectly honest, I just want it fixed.
Okay. I think we would propose there's a better way to fix it.
There's a policy way to fix it, and honestly, and your point's well taken. Chief Kenny Francis ran the Gardner Police Department on a shoestring. This is a well-established fact. I can't find anybody that will debate it. And he was a fine man, but he's if I've said it once, I've said it 100 times. He's the only guy I know in the city organization that could squeeze a nickel and make 6 pennies drop. He was very tight-fisted. Laura knows what I'm talking about. Actually, Mike does too, because he was serving here as interim city administrator, and Kenny was still with us. But, you know, we've changed things significantly since then. We presented at a recent meeting, Councilmember Harrison presented a spreadsheet that showed how high spending had gone. It's increased to 33% since 2011.
I'm glad you brought that up because we hadn't spent hardly anything prior to that, and we had the fire department as part of Gardner, which we had one person sitting in a fire truck at 3 different places in town at any one time. That's expenses that were going out when we had the police officers ready to run around. But because we spent more now and we failed to spend the right amount the first time does not mean things are rosy. It means that we're catching up.
And honestly, I think that one of the things, the first budget session that Chief Pruding sat through, he had suggested some cars, somebody had suggested maybe he needs more. We asked him, and I said, tell us what it is that you're looking for. And I believe he got a number greater than what he actually asked.
That's only because I asked, and if you remember that meeting, we were told 3 cars in the budget, and I said, there's no way we need more than 3 cars. We said, Chief, how many do you really need? He said 6, and we had decided as a governing body to get him 8 cars.
Yes.
So to try to say that we gave him everything he wanted is not factually true, because when the budget came through, it was 3 on the budget. And when we asked him in person what he wanted, it was 6, and then we gave him 8.
Yeah.
So I want to put that in perspective. That's exactly what happened.
And let me also interject a little bit here too, because the reason why that car discussion took place was because there was a member of the Citizens Police Advisory, or former individual in the Citizens Police Academy that undertook a core request to get information relating to the state of the fleet.
Right.
Okay? And that's what started the conversation, but it took a core request to get that information. It should never have gotten to that. We should have been proactively looking at the state of the fleet well before that happened. We were caught unawares by a lot of that.
I stood up there as a citizen and said that the cars had over 140,000 miles. The lowest mileage car was 90,000 miles, and we were spending tons of money. I
Those were
ride
Interceptors.
along with on an Interceptor that you turned right and the front end went chunk, and I said, "What's that?" And they go, "Oh, it's always done that. We can't fix that." Oh, we've tried 3 times. We've had it rebuilt.
I mean,
so to say that we were getting everything they needed is not actually correct.
First off, if I said getting everything they needed, I said, we asked the chief, what do you need? He gave us a number. We gave him more than that. And, I mean, you basically just reframed what I said, but, you know, that's the case. I mean, we're doing better than we were in 2011, the first year that we had no fire involved with public safety in Gardner.
okay, so here's my question, Chris, and I don't want to sound like I'm ganging up on you, but in 2015, when that request was put in, okay, he asked for 3 cars. Why would he have asked for 3 cars when he knew he needed more?
Okay.
That's the question I have.
Okay, well,
And what's the comment? What's the?
actually, I'll answer.
Yes,
if you'll give
please.
me a chance.
Absolutely.
Okay, and actually, I talked with Chief Pruding about this, back in 2015.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Chief, new here, getting advice from people that had been through the budget process before. In this particular case, Jay Belcher, who had guided us through a budget session,
Mm-hmm.
and Laura Gorley as our finance director.
Okay.
Well, Laura spent 25 years working with Ken Francis, and Jay had worked for Ken Francis and gotten pretty much the same advice from Jim Moore, that you don't ask for too much.
Sure.
And I think Chief was doing the right thing, trying to get the best information so that he could make a proper request. And if you ask him, I believe he will tell you that I said, if there's stuff that you need, now's the time to ask. But he was going off the advice he was getting from other people in the department and inside the city organization. And I think going forward, I don't think we're going to have a problem with Chief Pruding asking for what it is that he would like. At least I would hope not. Can I count on you for that, Chief?
Yes.
Very good.
And again, I totally understand. And he hadn't had a chance to properly evaluate the fleet at the time either, correct?
Sure.
And so we really didn't have a great handle on exactly how dire straits the situation was. But when we've got guys driving cars and they're going ka-chunk, that's probably not a good thing if it's an interceptor. And we had multiple cars like that, and we've heard the stories from former members of the force that...
If I might make an observation.
Please.
Absolutely.
And I have seen this in a lot of my work that I do with governing bodies throughout the area. You're evolving. Your culture is evolving. Your professionalism is evolving. The things the way they used to be, old school, and I was here and it wasn't that long ago.
No, it wasn't.
It was pretty old school. I hope that I was instrumental in a little bit of evolution in a couple of areas. But it's an ongoing process. If you want to pursue excellence, you need to continue to evolve. So in the days where the culture said don't ask for too much because if you over-ask, you'll get nothing, those days are behind you. It's evolving. As relationships evolve and people work together, and if you can keep in mind that everyone here ought to be pursuing, and I believe are pursuing, the same ends. We want what's best for this city. We want what's best for our citizens. We want what's best for our taxpayers, our stakeholders, our visitors, our businesses. And in turn, that means you also want what's best for your police department. Completely appropriate, totally on mark as to what you ought to be doing. The question becomes how? How do we accomplish these things that we're frustrated by? And you're frustrated by them as you should be, because you don't want to be a city council person overseeing a police department that has a fleet that might not perform when it needs to.
Exactly.
You want that fixed. And there's a way to do that as your culture and as your professionalism and as the relationships in the organization evolve. We're taking a snapshot in time. Things don't look great from that perspective on the fleet this minute. It will be better. It will be better next month, and it'll be better next year, and it'll be better in subsequent years, is my guess. So let's not necessarily make rash determinations on a snapshot in time, and let's look at where the organization is in its momentum moving forward and try to encourage that continued growth and understanding, and I think things will go better.
Yeah, well, I think so too. I do have I talked with a former city employee recently that, and I'm thinking about this because the mayor's comments about there needing to be equality between the department heads. And, I mean, you were a long-time police chief, but you believe that there should be equality between the department heads. And I would imagine equality between the employees, even though the police employees are held to a higher standard. But, this particular person said, what about somebody that works in, say, the water plant, and they've got to keep the water clean and flowing, and what if they deliver a bad batch and you got a neighborhood full of sick citizens? So there's lots of people working inside the city organization that are doing important jobs, but Can you just talk a little bit, I mean, from a police chief's point of view and from a mayor's point of view about the importance of there being equality there?
Well, I mean, it's the same level of accountability. You know, I was thinking about something the other day, and I don't think it's appropriate for me to ask questions, but I'm gonna make some assumptions. I would assume, your city manager, city administrator has a contract for employment. An employment contract that has conditions for her duties and whatnot. I would imagine that your police chief does not have a contract.
That's correct.
Okay, can you see why, there'd be a problem if he were to be answerable to you without a contract? Because there's a reason why my city administrator has a contract, and that's because he works for the council, and you can't find competent city administrators to hire who won't require that they have a contract, because it's very difficult to trust the decision-making sometimes of city council. They can decide they don't like you, again, you're out of a job, and then what do you do with your family if you moved them here? You gotta have a contract. I don't think you want to put your police chief in that position. I know I wouldn't want to be put in that position for that reason alone. Yes, of course, and there's a lot of, I wouldn't call it jealousies, but, you know, department heads look at each other as equals. Whether that's fire chief, if you have a fire department, you guys are on District 1, aren't you?
Yep.
So maybe that doesn't apply, but Public Works, Finance Department, all those look at each other as peers. Suddenly you take one and you've elevated them because of operational issues or your desire to help them, that takes them out of that peer group. They're in a different group. They're in this hybrid group all on their own. And again, it's going to create all kinds of problems for your operation, for the way that your city operates. As a mayor, I sit here and listen to the discussion, and I'm always gratified to hear that while you're not communicating very well, this is my opinion, you're all really heading in the same direction. You really want the same thing. It's how you achieve it. I think some of you want it right now. You talked about years of having somebody in charge, and I knew Chief Francis for many years, who maybe was very careful about how he made his expenditures. When I was police chief, I went through the whole process of how long do you keep a car? We thought 90,000, 100,000. There was a time where we changed them out every 2 years, regardless of mileage. We used to do that. We hired a city administrator that used to be the assistant city administrator under Mike Pence, and he came and said, "Why are we doing this?" This is city administrator now. And we said, "Well, it's because we want to get new cars every other year. That way they're new, they don't break down, they're safe." He says, "I think we can keep them a little while longer, stretch some of that money out." And at the end of the day, we ended up keeping cars until they hit 90,000, and we traded them out. And so we decided, with the city administrator's help, that we were going to have a policy that made fiscal sense. Now, I never got a request from any council member asking me about what our policies were for mileage and when we traded out cars. However, if I had been as the mayor, if I had a council member that came to me and said, "Hey, I'm concerned about these police cars. They look really old, and I think we should do something about it. They don't look like they're duty fit." And believe me, as a police officer, and I've been in, unfortunately, more pursuits than I'd like to admit, so there's something about driving a police car, over 100 miles an hour on city streets, particularly on the midnight shift, where you start beginning to wonder what kind of shape that car's really in at that speed. So it's crucially important. It'd be no different than giving them a gun that was produced in World War I. You know, I mean, this is not something you do.
Sure.
But if you have that concern, then there's one person you need to go to make sure that's fixed, and that's your city administrator. That's what she's paid to do. And you need to tell her, here's what maybe you as a group or maybe you as an individual say, "I'd like a report on how our police cars are routinely changed out. And I'd like to have a report to the council." Maybe talk to the mayor, and the mayor say, "Hey, Mayor, can we put this on the agenda?" You bring your police chief, you get to ask questions. If you don't like, your city administrator is going to get a chance to explain, "Well, we can't do exactly that because you guys don't provide us with the budget. You don't give me enough money to put in the budget to do the things that you want. So you're going to have to do that. Everybody's going to have to work together and make this thing work. And it's going to require communication. It's going to require trust. I see that you have a lack of trust right here. And I've worked in councils. I worked under councils. When I took over a council, I had a lack of trust issue. And it takes a lot of communication. It takes leadership. It takes accountability. And if you can't achieve that, then changes have to be made. Because if you don't achieve that, you will continue this cycle of distrust and miscommunication.
I think you focused exactly on the issue that we have at hand here, and that is, there is a communication and trust gap.
Right.
And until we close the communication and trust gap, we're gonna be around the same table. Personally, I'd like to get past these conversations and move on to the business of the city. I think we all are unified in 90% of what we discuss here. We're unified as to what we want to do and the approach we want to take. Economic development, municipal code, public works. I mean, we are unified.
We do have 4 strategic goals.
Absolutely, and I think we're all in tune with those. But we've got to close that trust gap.
Right, because it creates distractions and it keeps you from doing the business that the people elected you to do.
Yep.
And it also keeps you from doing the hard work that some of your staff people do, because they're not, the lack of trust runs in directions both up and down.
Exactly.
So, when they see this dissension, that creates problems with morale, it creates problems with performance. And a lot of great, statements have been made, points have been made tonight by everybody here. I mean, I think you should be happy with the information you've received. Any,
I actually had a question for Terry. One of the last things you talked about was liability.
Yes.
And risk. Can you expand on that a bit? As far as, is the liability, are we talking more with the council that we would set up to govern if this happened, or are we talking our liability here with the governing body?
Well, my point,
I missed.
yeah, my point was if you, presently there is no direct relationship, so there is no path to liability to you, but if you create that, then anyone that has that direct management oversight would be questioned for policy and procedure in those.
Anybody else have anything? I've got one quick question. I know that we've got Terry there that's reporting to a couple of different boards, Ben's worked at Unified Government in Olathe. Mike's worked at the county in MedAct, and Ken was in Merriam. You weren't just in Merriam, were you?
I worked at the Sheriff's Department, I worked in Halo, and of course I work at college now, so I work for a huge
So,
That's the truth.
let me ask you something, and this might be best for Mike because of his previous position. I mean, is it easier to work with? I believe at the county it's 7 different bosses, or is it easier to work with one boss?
Well, technically, 7 or 5 or 6 or however many ought to be one boss.
Mm-hmm.
They are one boss, and it's unfortunately a line I had to use more than I cared to. Telling an elected official, sorry, sir, you're not my boss. What do you mean? The governing body by statute is my boss. You are a citizen. When you speak to me directly, you speak to me as a citizen. When you speak to me from the dais in concert, now you're my boss. So you have to make that differentiation, I think. It's sort of important for accountability. And, when I was young, I wanted to please everybody. I'd go running off doing things, and then I got caught by another commissioner saying, well, you did it in his district, now you have to put an ambulance in my district.
Mm-hmm.
And my answer to that was, we don't resuscitate bovine animals, but I was a smart aleck when I was a younger manager. So.
Those of us that know you know that that hasn't changed much.
That probably hasn't changed very much.
So,
Are there any other questions that any of you have of any of our panel? I would like to thank these gentlemen for
Thank you.
being here tonight. We've gone back and forth on email, and because of different scheduling issues, they've stayed with it, and I just want to thank them very much for
Yeah.
being here this evening.
Thanks.
Really.
very
Thank
much,
you.
all of you. We really appreciate it.
And thank you all for your time.
Thanks, Mike.
All right. We got about a 10-minute break, everybody,
Great.
before council meeting starts.
All right.
So,